and welcome to The Black Unconscious,
a mental health podcast about living, coping, and thriving while Black.
I'm Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology.
And I'm Dr. Justin Hopkins, a licensed clinical psychologist.
This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a therapeutic relationship with a licensed therapist.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hey, and welcome to The Black Unconscious. We are your hosts. I am Dr. Justin Hopkins.
And I'm Raquel Martin.
And this is episode 3 of season 2, What's Love Got to Do with It, part 2.
Yes. So we're just going to expand upon the stuff that we talked about last time and add some new stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so last time we talked a lot about some of the ways in which you can maintain relationships, some of the main issues in relationships, and also one thing that I was really excited to share about is basically how we come to choose a partner and the kind of relationships that we look for. That process of falling in love, there's a lot that goes into it, some conscious and unconscious. And so we expanded upon that. But today we want to get into some other things, right, Raquel?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about like a bunch of stuff. So one, we're going to start with like attachment styles and stuff like that and all the research that went into that. And then we're also going to talk about like hallmarks of positive relationships, negative relationships, and then like the love languages, which is probably going to be what Justin geeks out about this week.
I love
Last
love
week
languages.
He geeked out about like how you choose a partner, and it was pretty gross to watch. And this week it's gonna be love languages, where he gets to use all his personifications and what are some other words that you like to use?
I don't know. I'm a definitely go in though.
5-syllable words.
I'm gonna definitely go
$20 words when a $5 word will do.
Well,
you know?
because love languages, in particular, why I like geek out about those is they always have a place in couples therapy. And
because couples therapy is your thing. It's not really my thing.
It is. So, and I think it has a place in how we express and receive love as well. But first, we want to go back again, like to attachment styles. And the reason why we're doing this, right? There's a lot of research and a lot of things written on attachment theory, and it basically is the basis for how human beings respond within relationships when they are separated from their loved ones, how they learn to explore the world, and how we learn to deal with hurt in relationships.
Yeah, like basically, so like the main reason why I like working with kids is because so much like you get to teach children stuff that's going to stick with them through their whole lives. But like with parenting, it's one of the reasons why some stuff is so hard, because everybody's going to mess up their kids in some way. I mean, like, it's just, just hopefully they'll have some funny stories out of it. Right. But like the stuff sticks with them for the rest of their life. And that's like what attachment styles are about. Like started with John Bowlby. He's a researcher, and he just basically did research with children and how their attachment styles show how they engage with the world during times of being hurt and things like that. But it's based off of this whole aspect of a secure base. So the secure base basically means that I would say it's just like your bedrock. So if you have an insecure base, it basically means that you don't feel comfortable leaving your home environment, right? And if you don't feel comfortable leaving your home environment, you're not going to explore, you're not going to learn, and that's going to impact your relationships. Right. And that all starts from your most salient relationships, which are parent relationships. So and then now I kind of like to think of it more as like caregiver relationships, because a lot of people aren't being reared solely by their parents. Like you got like great aunts, you got grandparents, you got, I think I said aunts, grandparents, and stuff like that. So it's really like a caregiver relationship. It's not just parents anymore.
So right. So basically your first caregiver is that base. Yeah. Right? And in order for an infant to successfully develop emotionally and socially, they need a relationship with at least one person to teach them how to interact and to regulate their feelings with other people.
And they can teach them in like a positive way, or they can teach them in a mad negative way, which is where like abuse and neglect and stuff like that happen.
Right. And a lot of that stuff gets communicated again through like micro messages and just small things on a daily basis over and over and over and over and over. We often think about trauma as like a single incident, but trauma is also these small things that consistently happen over time for a child who is being emotionally abused or told that they can't have certain feelings ever.
Yeah. And then it's also like, so it's like what you said, it's the chronic issue, but then it's also the fact that like, it's not always like stuff you say. It's like stuff people observe and witness and stuff like that, because it's like a lot of times some people don't think about all the stuff that children pick up. Like they pick up stuff all the time, and you just may not be cognizant of it. Yeah. So like the way that they also did experiment with it. So like Mary Ainsworth, who was a student of John Bowlby, she did this experiment called the Strange Situation, which was real cool. Yeah. So she had like the parent in the room with the child, right? And the child gets to like explore the room. The room has toys and stuff like that. But then a stranger comes in the room. And the stranger comes in the room. The mom engages with the stranger, and then the kid normally goes back to what they're doing. And then the mom leaves the room. And then, of course, the kid starts like tripping because the person is trying to like engage with them and stuff like that. And it's a stranger. And then the parent comes back and the child calms down. And you kind of look at like how long it took them to calm down after they, like the parent returned. And the whole point is to look at like the amount of exploration that the child has, because that looks at like secure base and stuff like that. And the reaction to like the departure of the parent to see if they have like a secure style, an insecure style and stuff like that. You want to expand on different styles? Yeah.
I'll expand on different styles. And the reason why that is so important, again, is because seeing how that child interacts with the stranger or governs himself while the parent is not in the room or that caregiver is not there kind of explains where they are psychologically when it comes to relationships.
Yeah.
Are they like having a tantrum and they can't be consoled and it just continues and continues and continues even when the parent returns in the room? Are they able to engage with that stranger for a little while and then the parent comes back and then after a while they get a little antsy with that stranger and then the parent comes back and the child is okay? Or is it that the child has is incapable of doing much without the parent being very, very close? So all of those things kind of dictate then how we orient ourselves in new relationships. It goes from just that infant, from being that infant and interacting with strangers, how we learn to do that definitely has impact on who we are as adults and how we interact in relationship.
Yeah, because if you don't feel comfortable, like venture it out into the world, like what kind of life can you have? And especially with the fact that like a lot of children are being more homeschooled now, but what about when they go to school and like you want them to engage in like extracurricular activities and stuff like that, but they're just so uncomfortable and parents can't be there all the time. The whole point of like rearing a child is so that they get older and they can become autonomous, right? So if like it's to the point where they're never comfortable, like what kind of life can you expect them to live? And honestly, as a parent, what kind of life do you want to live? Because like nobody wants their child around 24/7. Like
but then if a parent is too dismissive, right, then that child doesn't feel comfortable having their needs taken care of, or they feel really anxious where they may feel like they need the parent or can't rely on the parent. So let's get into some of these attachment styles, right? So there's 4, right, and they all again transition into like how we would as adults start to attach to other people. So the first one is the secure attachment.
Which is what you want.
This is what you want.
You want your child to have a secure attachment.
Absolutely. So there's that balance, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's when a child can feel like they can rely on the caregivers to attend to their needs, of being close to the parent, of needing emotional support and protection. And this is really the best style. And the child, when that parent leaves, might feel distressed, but is happy when the caregiver returns and is able to seek comfort in that caregiver.
Yeah, so like it's like when something goes wrong, they know that they can go to their parent to like calm down and things like that, but they don't have to reside there. Like there's no huge fear. So like something goes wrong, I check with mom, she kisses the boo-boo or whatever, but then I go back to play because it's like, I mean, you're gonna be here, you're my base, I know you're cool. You'll be here when I get back.
Right. Yeah. You can come and go. There's independence, there's interdependence.
Yeah,
where
like
you
it's
can
the perfect
switch
balance.
back and forth. So you're okay trusting that person to take care of your needs, and you're okay with being intimate and vulnerable with them, and you also develop your own sense of autonomy, right? And so children who have that kind of attachment style as adults, they're more likely to feel comfortable with intimacy and independence and balancing the two, right? So then there's the insecure avoidant attachment, where a parent is unresponsive, uncaring, or dismissive, where a child comes to the parent and they're like, just kind of agitated with them needing something or frustrated with the child automatically.
Consistently. That's just always like your kid comes to you and it's always like an issue. And it's like, I mean, are you not my parent? Am I not supposed to be coming to you if I need something? Is that not a thing? Like, I didn't know this was our agreement. Like, I'm not supposed to be coming to you when I have a problem.
Right. Yeah. And you know what's interesting, right? Like, every parent at some point is going to have a limit.
Yeah, right? Because parenting, man, I work with all these parents. They're exhausted.
Of course.
Like, I see their kids for an hour, and I'm just like, you're a saint. Because it's tiring for them. Yes. But it's like, it's the consistency of it. So, like, everyone understands that, like, parents have a limit, that children are hard, that they're sleep deprived, they still have to work. But it's when you consistently are just so, like, negatively reacting to your child, like, you're dismissing them, you're not showing them any kind of attention or affection. Like, what kind of base do you expect them to have?
Right.
None. Like, that, to me, that would be like having the base of, like, so secure attachment will be like bedrock, right? Like that would be something that's like concrete and firm. With the insecure types are like rice paper or something like that. Like it's you
I
can't
like
really
that,
like
yeah.
do anything with it.
Right.
And it's like, this is where we expect to be their jumping off point.
Right.
And they can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have that, right, that insecure avoidant attachment where the parent is like dismissive or communicates something that's uncaring, the child is likely to be distressed when the caregiver leaves and may not acknowledge the caregiver when they return, because that child is like, they're sad that the parent left because they need the parent, but they also don't get what don't get what they need from the parent when the parent is there. So when the parent comes back, they kind of don't really acknowledge it. They may not see contact with the caregiver, and they're really, really hard to console, because that child is in a place of kind of avoiding the parent, but kind of like going back and forth. And so that's a really, really unfortunate attachment.
Well, yeah, because they don't really have a salient role in their life. So it's like if I'm constantly coming to you and you're dismissive and you're like avoidant or whatever, I'm not gonna keep coming to you. So like when you whether you come in or whether you leave, I mean, I'm not really responding to it because I'm so used to you dismissing me when I come to you. Like, how much do I truly need your presence?
Right. So children who have that kind of attachment,
the insecure avoidant,
right, they grow up they're more likely to have an attachment in adulthood where they really, really prefer a high level of independence. They often struggle to make themselves vulnerable and have trouble with intimacy, because intimacy obviously requires that kind of vulnerability. So this person really highly desires their self-sufficiency and independence, and they can struggle in romantic relationships with depending on their partner or asking for help when it's needed. Yeah,
which could so your independence is good to a certain extent, but like in relationships, like you want to have a reciprocal relationship, right? And like I think last week we were talking about how like some people find it difficult to let go of control, and to me that's because you don't have the trust of the other person. Because if you don't think if someone is going to handle it correctly, then you don't want to let go of that control. Like I'm not going to let you have the wheel and you can't freaking drive. So I feel like the lack of control, like not wanting to release it, is also a lack of trust in your partner, which can also come from lack of trust in your other relationships. Like it's not solely, a lot of people will think of it as simply like, oh, well, they just don't want to have control. They just want to hold on to the control. But it's also like, well, to me, it seems like they don't really have full trust in you. So that's something you got to address too. Because if I trust you 100% to handle something, I'm going to let you handle it. That's one less thing I got to do.
Yeah, I think the problem there is that, right, like just as you said, it like prevents you from like having the kind of like trust that you would like. But I think also there's like there's fear, right? There's fear that person will be let down. In other words, like the wound of being dismissed by a parent so much early in life, they cope with that by trying to be this self-sufficient machine that doesn't have to then ask for something and be rejected. Yeah,
you can't dismiss me if I'm not even giving you the opening to do it.
Right.
Like, and I can't think of any rejection that's worse. That's like your first real, rejection. Like that's pretty messed up. So it's a real difficult place to be. And it's like on some aspect, it's great to be in control and self-sufficient, but we walk through life, and I don't think you walk through life looking for like acquaintanceships or like these real superficial relationships. You want to have like, I don't want an acquaintance, I want a friend. I'm not trying to like, smang a bunch of people. I want to have like a serious relationship. So it's like you walk through life and the goal of life is not to have all of these superficial relationships, in my opinion. Like you want to build upon things. So if you're constantly like building walls, like yes, you building walls, you keeping out all the bad, good job, but you're also keeping out all the good. Like you can't do both. Like,
right. So a person with that kind of attachment may have some of those issues with building too many walls, not letting them down, or feeling just really back and forth, kind of anxious about whether to let them down or not. Yeah. So then there's the insecure ambivalent attachment. And so this is when essentially it's when the infant feels kind of like this separation anxiety. Like they rely on you rely on the parent so much. And you feel really threatened by so many other people in your environment as that child that it's really scary when that parent, that secure base, leaves you.
Yeah, I think of it more like, so like the avoidant one is like you're consistent. So secure one is like you're consistent with all the love and affection. Yes. The insecure avoidant is one where you're consistent with avoiding them, like, no, it's a no for me.
Because you're used to being dismissed.
You're used to being dismissed. But like the insecure ambivalent one, you never know what you're going to get, because sometimes they will show you like love and affection and care and stuff like that, and sometimes they won't. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like when we talked about
That's a good point. So just to clarify, right? Yeah. That's with the parent who's
that's with the caregiver. Yeah. Yes. That's how the caregiver responds.
So the child has separation anxiety, but it's not because the parent has been consistently loving and affectionate and responsive. The parent has actually been inconsistent in their response, but the child is anxious anxiously looking for there to be the positive response that they hope for.
Yeah, because the anxiety comes from like you don't know whether they're going to come back or not. Because sometimes they're like dismissive with their love, but sometimes they're not. So it's like, well, where am I? It's like when we talked about aspects of stress, the predictability is one of the things that happens with us as adults, like makes it less stressful. Like how did I say it last time? If you knew every single day at 5 p.m. you're gonna get an electric shock. Yeah. All right. But if at the same vein, like if you just found out that like you're gonna get one electric shock today every day, you don't know when it's gonna happen. There's no predictability. That's when the anxiety increases. So like the same thing happens with children. Like whether you're consistently avoiding them or whether you're consistently showing them affection, you're still being consistent with what you're doing. Yeah. The insecure, ambivalent one is like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like I can go to her and she might hug me. I can go to her and she might tell me to get out her face. Like, right. That's anxiety provoking. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to get. Like, that's the issue.
So in that strange situation that you talked about where we were, this research experiment where you're, again, like testing how children's attachments are and how they manage the angst they feel when their primary caregiver leaves the room. Yeah. So this child who has this insecure, ambivalent attachment, they're upset when the parent leaves, and they remain upset when the parent returns because they're worried that the one person in their life that at least sometimes gives them the things that they need is gone. But then when they return, that same parent it's hard to rely on them still. So it's like, I'm still upset that you left in the first place, and now I don't know if you'll be able to console me now that you've returned. So I remain upset even though you're here. So
they just stay freaking out.
So with this kind of person, right, if you have this kind of attachment, as an adult, you're more likely to actually seek high levels of intimacy and approval and responsiveness from your partners. You become a little bit dependent on them reassuring you, showering you with affirmation. You tend to be a little less trusting because, again, you grew up with someone who is kind of like inconsistent. And so you actually want somebody who's going to be able to reassure you constantly, so that trust is there. And
like, who wants that? Who wants to say like every 5 seconds? Okay, let's say it's hard. It's annoying. Like to have to be like, oh, you're doing a great job. Yes, okay, once again, so glad you're here. Oh, still, it's just like, all right, like we've been together for 3 years though. I'm not going to keep doing this. And it's draining. So it's like, I feel like it's draining to the person who's doing it. But it's draining to the person who's in a relationship, right? Because it's just like, well, how many times do I have to tell you I like your face today? I've already told you this. Like,
how many times do I have to tell you how much I love you and how awesome I think you are and how capable I think you are?
Yeah, like that's exhausting.
How competent and enough you are. And it doesn't become enough, right? Just like in that strange situation when the parent does return, the child is still upset, right? Yeah. Well, similarly, right? Even when you're showered with those kind of affirmations in a relationship, it may not work. Right, because the person still doesn't believe it themselves. Yeah, and so there's still something that's missing.
Yeah, you gotta be good parents. This shit's hard.
And then the last one of all, the fourth attachment style. I mean, there's really not too much to say about this. This is the abusive, neglectful kind of style. It's called the insecure or disorganized attachment. Yeah, and where a parent is neglectful. Responds to the child in frightening or frightened ways,
like screaming and stuff, or like right. I know this sounds crazy, but I've seen a lot of parents do this, like fake pump at kids, like you be like, yeah, when you be like, oh, I'm about to. I see parents do this all the time. That's not okay, and not solely in like a clinical setting, like. Like at the mall, like I was at the mall and I was just like, oh shoot, I jumped. Like that's like, so it's not solely like the screaming stuff. It's like some people think it's just the hitting, but it's like am I like one of you just gonna act like you about to sock me? It's a lot of parents I've seen do this.
Well, that's right. Like if you threaten a child, they will learn to grow up. They will learn to attach to you based around fear.
Yeah, and they'll be jumpy as heck, and then they're not gonna feel comfortable anywhere, right? Like that's, and it's also the emotional abuse aspect because I think a lot of people forget that. Yeah, so like verbal abuse.
Exactly. So it's not just physical abuse, but it's not, and not just telling. We're not talking about telling a child no. We're talking about outright neglect, and then the child then responding, or the parent being doing things that threaten the child or make the child feel frightened, right? And then the child, again, what they'll do is they'll respond feeling like dazed, confused, apprehensive in the presence of the parent.
It's like, remember when we went to Busboys and Poets to work on it, and we saw like this amazing parent who like the child was tripping.
Yes.
And
The
she
child was
responded
upset.
so well.
It like
Like
really
I kind of,
warmed
we were
my
just
heart.
like, we kind of want to clap it up
Yeah.
for this. Like it was crazy. I was
Because
just like,
we
what?
forget, right? I think.
Well, how did she respond? Like, so the kid was tripping.
So the kid was upset. I think what it was, we
Crying
overheard.
aloud in a
we were
restaurant.
definitely eavesdropping.
Yeah,
like hell.
because I wanted to see how she was going to handle it. Anytime I'm always afraid I'm going to have to call CPS on somebody.
If my memory serves me right, the child wanted to order French fries for like the second or third time in a row.
And they had already had them.
They had already had French fries. And so he was upset because mom didn't let him order French fries. And mom sat him down outside. She brought him outside away from everyone and sat him down. And he said, I know you're upset, but I want you to grow up to be a big, strong boy. And I know you want to as well.
Yeah, so you can't have any more fries.
So
Talking all calmly while he's still crying.
He's still crying.
Yeah.
And she said, I know you're upset. You can be upset. But I want you to be healthy. And you want to be healthy too, right? And grow up into a big, strong boy. And he said, yeah, I do. And then she said, well, why don't we eat this today? And then maybe we can do French fries another time.
Yeah.
And
then they walked in. Like, she had to carry him out of there because he was crying. And then they walked back in together. Yeah. And I was just like, I mean, can we
like box this up and sell it? Yeah.
Because, like, it's just... Children are going to push limits. Like, it's normal for children to push limits. Yes. It's like, oh my God, I hate going to the grocery store when they like in the candy aisle. And like the kid starts freaking out and the parents like, no. And it's like kids are supposed to want candy. Yes. So it's not just saying no, like exactly what you said. It's like, it's how you say no.
Don't be mad at the kid for wanting Skittles.
Like
kids
Skittles
are supposed
to freaking amazing. Right, like, what do you expect? Like, and they can't understand why. And then it's also just like, but there's all this candy here. And my brain does not process like, well, I mean, why? Why can I not have candy?
We often forget that kids are humans. They're like whole humans. And those little humans grow up to be big humans with the same, and they learn lessons through the ways that we interact with them.
Yeah.
So that child is going to grow up, assuming that interaction is consistent, that child will grow up with a more secure attachment, thinking that it's okay for me to be upset, and relationships can withstand me being upset or being happy. I can express and talk things out. Mom can tell me no, and I can have my feelings about it, and we can still go about our day and resolve things. I can still be vulnerable with you because you took care of my feelings, and I can depend on you when I need to, and maybe even separate from you when I need to as well. So that's
like, I don't
indicative
need to
of
be
a more
snapped at.
secure attachment.
Yeah.
But just so to wrap this up, like that last disorganized attachment, you usually find people who struggle with larger like character issues or personality disorders at times.
Yeah, because they've been abused or like neglected or stuff like that. It's like I'm pretty sure everyone knows someone who you're just like, oh my God, like who hurt you? And the answer is my mom. Like, or my dad, like,
my family.
My family hurt
people
me,
I met early in life.
So it's
or someone who intruded, like, or bypassed, like, the family protection. And hurt them. Yeah. Right? Because that happens
family
as well.
Friends do a lot of damage, too, especially
that person
with the kid.
So that person never really learns how to trust, and so a secure base isn't really a thing for them. Yeah. So they're always feeling on edge and uncomfortable with emotional closeness, and they kind of fearfully approach and avoid rather rapidly. They switch back and forth without there being a explicit trigger. Mm-hmm. There's where the partner is doing something. They're just kind of thinking about the level of trust that they have with that person and kind of going back and forth rather rapidly on which side that person falls on.
Yeah, see, this is why I love family, like, and kid therapy, and I'm sure it's the same way. Like, when we do since we're doing a relationship series, and when we do families, I'm a geek out the entire freaking time, because it's just like, yes, having a child is like such a big responsibility, but you are for real gonna have an impact on like every like single thing, and it may come out later, when they try to have relationships, but like it just comes out. That's why I love working with like I like working with teens more because like I like angry kids, but like working with families and seeing the dynamic, because the system changes, right? Like I'm sure like when you do couples therapy and then they like get a concept, or they finally like communicate on that thing that you've been seeing for forever, and they finally like do it, you just like, oh my God, progress. Like you guys are having a conversation about this. This is amazing. Like it's just like the aha moment is like the best moment in therapy. I feel like all of us just like as clinicians like just chase that aha moment, like it's coming. I know it. Like this is gonna be amazing.
Well, I think you also see those moments build, right, in small ways. And then one of the things I really like about therapy in general is that like when you make changes with one person, family systems can change,
right?
And
because
relationships
they're in their own
change,
system,
right? Because it not only makes you better knowledgeable about yourself, it can make you knowledgeable about how and why people interact with you in the way that they do.
Yeah, and you're in your, so like there are so many different systems because you have your family system, your friend system, your work, but like no matter what, you're going into like, I just think of it like solar system or whatever, you're going into these different dynamics and you have adjusted, like you have changed in some way. So you're going to impact other people, right? Like, so like as someone who, as a clinician, I push mental health on like every single one of my friends consistently. And like, and then sometimes they'll be like, I mean, I probably wouldn't even sought it out if you didn't say anything. Just because like I'm in my own system with mental health and I'm able to branch out and be like, oh, well, I kind of think maybe you should reach out to this or look into that.
Right.
So it's just helpful. I'm sure it gets annoying to them though. Right?
So,
like I think clinicians are probably annoying friends.
I mean,
like at times.
Maybe, yeah. Like I'm just not gonna like align with your desire to avoid this.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna therapize you. Like we be when we talk, we be like, you're not gonna therapize me, Raquel. Right? I'm like, well, you're not gonna therapize me, Dr.
But
Hopkins,
you did point out an observation, and I will note it.
I'm just saying, I just feel like positive self-talk could be helpful, but you do you. It's cool. You just do what you want to do, whatever.
I think it's also like, so we're kind of getting into this, you know, this is one thing that we wanted to talk about. It's like kind of some of the positive hallmarks of a good relationship, right? Some of the signs that a relationship is doing well or is healthy, right? And so like one of the things that you mentioned is like when you're able to communicate, right, around certain things that you observe in the other person.
Yeah, because I feel like you can't have a good like romantic relationship without the communication, because there's going to be something
with all relationships, right?
Yeah, well, all relationships.
But like but
we're on like what's love got? We're on like
right. So but going into going into the intimate
relationships.
It is. But fine. Going into like intimate partner relationships, what makes that particularly important?
Because communication is going to break down over time.
Exactly.
Especially if it's a long-term relationship. Like something is going to get confused at one time or another. So
because we're human.
So like if we can't talk about it, then it's just going to fester and then we're going to end up snapping.
Right. So, and I also think it's important, right? Again, we talked a little bit about this last episode, is that because we are human, we are imperfect. No matter how amazing your parents are, there are things that they did that were not perfect. Yeah. And you know, I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. If you think about it, right, we all get our genes, and then we all have different experiences, and the combination of those different things are infinite, and they're not always going to match up. And when there's an imperfect matchup, there are things that we learn about how to govern ourselves differently, right? So I think it's really important for couples to be in a space where they can say, like, this is something that I struggle with, or this is how I feel. Let me share that with you, because I'm having a different experience than you are. So I think that strong communication is so important, right? There is no one truth. There is only subjective reality. And I call it subjective reality because it is real, and the fact that it is not the only truth there is doesn't make it less true. Like, my experience of a particular thing can be as strong in my reflection of it as I want it to be, right? If I share, like, this is what I felt and this is how it impacted me, then that is what it is. But that doesn't mean somebody had that same experience. Yeah. But in a relationship, what's important is, I think, for each other to kind of understand why they have the experience that they have, and for a person to be able to kind of communicate that in ways that allow the partner to empathize and understand them better. And that's that strong communication goes in. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like in a relationship, you have to understand. So, like, you got to know, like, how the person is, but you also have to understand how that person is when they're mad. And here's why.
Ooh, that's good. Yes. That's good.
Like so sometimes when people are mad, they need space, right? Yeah. But like the other person may need to have a conversation, and then you could also be like struggling, like, to figure it out. So like, I always do self-disclosure. So when I first met my husband, like when we have arguments, I'd be like, oh, okay, so I'm not about to argue. Not even arguments, because it's like the least like conflict relationship I've ever had in my life. But like, it's like way mellow. Like, so anytime we had like disagreements or something like that, and I was just like, oh, cool. So I do not want to talk about this. So I'm going to see you, say it's Monday. I'm going to see you on Wednesday. And then like, I'll have cooled down. So it won't be an issue. So me, I think I'm handling this accurately, right? I'm like, all right, man, we're not arguing. Like, I get to cool off. Until one time he was like, so I'm going to need you to stop doing that, because you can't just like walk away when we have an argument. I was like, well, but I mean, like, we're not arguing though. So I just need my space. And he's like, yeah, but like, is it that bad that we can't just have a conversation about it? Like, you can't just. So I thought I was like, so when I'm mad, I need space. So instead of taking like a couple of days and just being a brat about it, which is really what it was, you just be like, okay, so you need like 10 minutes. You want to talk about this in 10 minutes? I mean, you can have your space, but you're not about to just walk away.
Right.
And like some people may see it as like, oh, okay, cool. So you didn't argue. You're not screaming. You're not yelling.
Yeah.
He was just like, why do you think you can't just keep doing this?
Yeah, it's so interesting. No, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because I think in general, right, people say like time heals all wounds. So when you need space, you take space and then the time during the space, like it'll heal. I seriously disagree with that idea. I think time heals all wounds only if during that time you work on healing the wound.
So you can't just so the way you see it, you can't just like walk away and do like my crazy behind like, oh, I'm gonna need 2 days, and every single time like he's mad mellow, so he's like, I mean, okay.
But he wanted to come back to it at some point.
So then,
right? So
you gotta. I'm not mad anymore. Like we good. And he's just like, all right. So until one time he was like, so this is a no. We're not doing this anymore. If you need space, that's fine.
Right.
But you can't just like walk away. That's just not
the
a
thing
realistic way to do stuff.
The thing is, right, like sometimes like those things may not be big enough deals where you're just like in the moment, okay, like I can forget about it. And not to be like overly crazy and hypervigilant about it, but little things unaddressed build up to larger things.
Yeah.
But it of course depends on like how little they are or how you actually felt. But
and
I think
previous relationships too. Like if you have a previous relationship where you always got taken to that point where you're like upset and screaming and you're like, I'm not gonna do this anymore, then you may do a complete 180 and just be like, well, I'm just gonna remove myself and not talk about it. Mm-hmm. But the person wasn't in that previous relationship when you were tripping, so you think you made progress. Yeah. But then you didn't really, because you're just kind of removing yourself from the situation, and like you said, you're not processing it so the issue doesn't come up again.
Right.
So it's kind of like it's not helpful because just like you said, if you're not processing it, you really just ignoring it until like, it goes away.
Until it goes away. And sometimes it does, or it may for the moment, but we all know that arguments are they're not just in the present. Arguments kind of transcend time often, because it's not just about the thing that you're arguing about in that moment. It's about the things before then and the fear that those things would continue. And so it's hard sometimes. I often try to help couples like think about like what happened in that present moment. Yeah. And then we'll use that to understand both your fear about the future and your thoughts about the past. But it takes a lot of effort to do that. And I think,
because do they really think of it every time? So I think like, so you come back to a thing, you're processing it. Mm-hmm. But then like I always feel like we're living in an abbreviated moment. So like the whole thing happened and then you want them to come back to it. Like how often do you feel like you saw a patient who was just like, I don't know what I was thinking, or because like if you have to come back and say you're thinking about like that fear in the moment, you have to go back to the moment.
Yes,
we only see them. Well, you may see people more than often, but it's like once a week. Yeah. So maybe sometimes people don't even. I could see getting stuck though.
Right. It depends on the frequency of the therapy, right? But it's not. Connecting the dots is hard. It's even harder to actually feel the dots that you are connecting. Like not just like cognitively think about them and say that makes sense and just dismiss them, but actually internalize them to the point where you actually feel differently about the thing that you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so one thing I like try to help couples see is just that like everybody comes in as playing some particular role. There's often an avoider and a pursuer. Right?
Every time?
Almost always. There's someone who when there's an argument, and maybe you switch roles depending on the argument.
Okay, so you don't have to stay. So okay,
you don't have to stay there. But sometimes it's more consistent, and the roles are like entrenched and stable. But
depending on argument topics, it may switch.
Yeah, it can, and depending on the injury. But there's usually someone who is like pursuing you to continue to talk about it, and another person that's just like, I'm not doing that.
What the freak voice is that? That was so creepy.
I don't want to talk to you about this.
Is that voice because they're like ducking and dodging?
You ducking and
dodging?
Like
that's the ducking and dodging. Like can't catch me. I'm not talking about this.
That's the shady. I'm not trying to resolve this or talk to you about this right now.
Can't catch me. You gonna have to catch me first. I'm not processing this. Let's get some food. Let's get over this.
We gotta dip.
We gotta dip.
I'm out. Conversation ended. Boom. Wall sealed. Wall up, rather. You're not getting past this. Not gonna bring it up again
until you make me mad about the same thing. Yeah. And then we gotta process it again.
And really, they probably share the same fear, right? That person, the person who's avoiding, is scared that if they talk about it more, it will end the relationship. The person who's pursuing is scared that if they don't talk about it, it won't get resolved and it'll end the relationship.
Ooh, you know where this comes up a lot, probably?
Where's that?
Making stuff official. Like not bringing up the whole conversation and making stuff official.
Connect the dots for me.
Like, so like you don't want to bring it up because then if the person doesn't want that, now you know that the person doesn't want that. So they just be like, so you like avoid the conversation and you can't bring it back, right? Like it's it's like you can't just be like, oh, just kidding. I don't want no relationship. I'm just kidding. Let's just go get food. But you can't because you heard it, right? So it's like, do you bring it up even though it's something you really want to talk about and then risk like them not feeling the same way? Or do you just kind of like not acknowledge what you want and then just dodge the conversation?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that happens a lot with people. Like they just, or at least what I've seen, they just don't want to bring it up because it's just like, I mean, but if I bring it up and they don't feel the same way, then that's out there. And I can't bring it back.
And then maybe whatever relationship I have right now, whatever it is, without its label or parameters, it's still something, and maybe I won't even have that anymore.
Yeah, because then somebody might be like, oh, you want a relationship? Oh, no. And then they kind of just start like backing up because they either, and it doesn't always have to be malicious. Maybe they didn't realize you wanted that, which I doubt because we're grown out here. But maybe they didn't realize you wanted that. But now that they do, maybe they feel bad about that. And they're just like, well, I kind of got to pull back because if this is just what he or she wants, I don't want that too.
Right.
But like, I think a lot of people avoid that conversation and then they're honestly just not acknowledging something that they want because it's not like you still don't want it, you're just not bringing it up.
Sure. I think there's a lot of like different ways in which we try to navigate our anxieties in relationships, right? And depending on how you navigate those anxieties, the individual persons and how each individual navigates their own anxiety, and then how they would navigate that anxiety within the relationship, whether that's fear of losing the person, fear of being rejected by the person, whatever, or just some fear of like trusting the person, fear of being vulnerable, some sort of angst about the relationship, and how each partner helps the other tend to that and vice versa, I think is really important. So like going back to what we were saying, like some of the hallmarks of like
we were talking about something else. some of the positive hallmarks of the relationship. So I forgot about that. What we say? Supported?
But we did talk about them, just not explicitly. Yeah. Because what we're saying is, right, this is a strong communication, and it takes a lot of, that's one, right? Another one we wanted to mention was just effort, and it takes a lot of effort, I think
that's one of the most important ones.
Yeah, to understand the other person, I think it takes effort, and to understand yourself takes effort as well. But if you can understand both yourself and the other person in a relationship, I think that goes a long way, and that does take effort.
And just to try. So, like, just to realize that, like, okay, so if I don't understand you, I'm willing to try to understand you. Mm-hmm. Or if I don't, like, understand, like, what you're explaining or the concept, I'm willing to try. Or if I made a mistake and I didn't know I made a mistake, I'm willing to, like, address it.
Yeah.
And then put forth the effort not to do it again. Because everyone's going to make mistakes. Like, someone's going to do something wrong. But if it's either, like, I'm going to be dismissive and be like, all right, well, I didn't think that was a bad deal. Or I can just be like, okay, well, I'm sorry. I'm just going to approach it a different way in the future. Like, really, you need effort. Like, because there's going to be times when stuff is difficult, or it's going to be times when stuff is easy. Yeah. And the way I think about it, when you first start dating, I mean, that's the easiest the relationship is going to be. Like, this is when you're first starting to get to know each other. Yeah. Y'all affectionate and stuff, snuggling, and like it's cuffing season, so y'all may be in this right now. Like, this is the easiest it's going to be. Right. And if y'all arguing like every 5 seconds now, and like this is the easiest gonna be. Like, we are not married, we don't have kids, like we just really kicking it, which is the hallmarks of like when relationships get even harder.
Yeah.
And we're arguing every time now. I mean, this is not gonna work. Like, how are we gonna build off of, like, we're building off of rice paper? Like, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Like, so I always feel like when a relationship starts and it's real rocky, I'm like, I mean, we really think this is gonna prosper? Like, we really just kicking it. Like, we're really just hanging out, and yet I still argue with you twice a day.
I would agree, right? That honeymoon phase is real. You know, and
it's glorious.
So if you don't have it, that's probably a bad hallmark. But if you do have it, it's a good hallmark. That you like each other enough that if you want to like have a positive and optimistic idea about it, you can say like the feelings of liking the other person are so strong, right? There's that infatuation that all of the other stuff that you'll have to navigate in a relationship, one, you're probably not close enough for those things to come to the fore anyway. Mm-hmm. But also, right, all the other stuff or other things that you get worried about or that get messed up in a relationship, they're kind of backburnered. They're not as important because you're just enjoying yourself so much.
Yeah, I'm not asking about the basis of every single one of your
Right.
past relationships. I'm just trying to go to dinner. Like, so can we,
Yeah,
like, you know,
and
like
have a
you
good
said,
time. Share
I'm
some
just trying to
laughs,
learn
have a
your
drink.
favorite color, your
Sure.
middle name. You got any siblings? Like, you getting to learn like all new stuff
Yeah.
about people. You're not really trying
Are
to like.
you a serial killer or not?
Yeah, are you trying to murder me?
Yeah.
Like, it would, like,
Right.
do I need to keep texting my friends your license
Right,
plate
right.
and letting them know when I'm out? Like, or are we past that? Like, it's the easy part. Like,
But
that's the fun part.
But you're right, though, right? The longer a relationship goes, the harder it is because there's more stuff to contend with. There's more that you know about the other person. And so it's going to take higher communication skills the longer you go. I think another really good positive hallmark is respect.
Yes.
Mutual respect. I think that is so underrated.
I think like the most dangerous thing in a relationship a guy can be is disrespected. And I think the most dangerous thing a girl can be in a relationship is underappreciated. Because like ego stuff, like males and females have egos, but like underappreciated women, it just seems like you just go somewhere else to be appreciated. Disrespected, like I see sometimes people like treat their mates, and I see it more with women treating men this way. So that's the only reason why I'm speaking this way. But treating their men like little kids, and they're gonna leave you for someone who makes them feel like a man. I'm just saying, like you can't just make people feel like little kids all the time. Like it's just like talking down to them, acting like they can't do anything right. Yeah. And it's just like, well, why would I stay with you if you make me feel like boo boo the darn fool all the time?
No, I see that dynamic often in heterosexual relationships as well. And I think, across gender and the orientation of the couple, I do think like in general, right? Like if you respect the person, right? There's someone to be acknowledged and considered, right? You think about them in a way where you're cognizant of their needs, the things that hurt, the things that they might not be able to express, but you appreciate who they are and their personhood, and you have a regard for it. Like that's
why you would respect them,
right?
Because if you don't, then why would you? That's why you treat them that way. If you don't respect them as a person,
right?
That's why you just.
And I think sometimes, like an easy follow from that is like pity. Like if you because pity can be like, well, it can be maxed as empathy or sympathy or even compassion. But if there's like a hint, for example,
I need an example.
Yeah, well, I think the example that you gave is part of it. Like for example, in a heterosexual relationship, if a man is treating, if the woman is based on their gender roles or how they decide to navigate and structure that, like if the woman is treating the man like a child, and that the patronizing kind of pitying kind of thing. I get that. And I've seen it the other way too, where the man treats the woman like a child, or a man treating a man like a child. So like, and that can and one thing that can contribute to that is like differences in age and experience.
Yeah, like, I feel like that's a whole other.
If someone like grew up in a family that was more sheltered, or there was a more an attachment style that facilitated this kind of dependence, and then another person had to be independent all their life, right? That independent person might
you're kind of like,
the
do it
dependent
yourself.
person.
I'm not about to do this for you.
Or they'll do it with them with a hint of pity.
Or annoyance. Which is even worse, because it's just like, if you didn't want to, why do it? If you're going to do it with like that tinge of like annoyance or pity and stuff like that, like it's just like, then just don't do it.
So mutual respect, I think, is so important. Like just regarding that person as their own individual, capable entity, and that goes a long way.
And
that
appreciation too.
And appreciation. I would say along those same lines. Another one is being just someone who's supportive.
Yeah. Because, the world is already difficult enough. And this is how I say this to parents a lot when a lot of times they don't want their child to grow up, weak or soft or stuff. But, the world is difficult enough. And especially since I work mostly with minority patients. The world is hard enough without the child having to come home and worry about, you snapping at them because you're trying to toughen them up. Just be supportive to the person, or just be supportive to your mate, because, we have work, people have school, people got to deal with, especially as minorities, black men and black women, being targets all the time. But when you come home or when you get to hang out with that person, they should be your calm, your sense of calm. I don't want to have to come back and have to, and fight with you. Like, I don't want you to have to, you just got off of work and then you come home and then you got to, I'm sure you don't want to deal with my shit either. Yeah. Like, you've been working all day and then I'm just like, so.
Right.
It's funny how, like, it's just like nobody wants to do that. So it's just like,
right.
I feel like if you learn how to like back it up and have a conversation with it, it's easier. But you know, all of us, everyone in the world, but also with minorities, we all dealing with like difficult stuff every single day, microaggressions, stupid shit every single day. Like, but when you have a relationship, if you're good enough to find that relationship, you don't want to have to battle in that relationship too, because it's constant battles every single day when we walk out into the world.
Absolutely. So you want to have a relationship that gives you peace of mind, that is a break from the rest of the world, that is a source of relaxation and enjoyment, something that feels satisfying. And again, with the understanding, right, that all couples, every single couple goes through periods of argument. Well, first of all, has arguments, may go through periods of where they're not on the same page, right? Like, I think often we like to think of, we like to aspire towards having a relationship that is in sync all the time, and that's just not real. Again, because humans are imperfect and incredibly complicated, and we all have our own subjective versions of the truth, there are going to be times when you're not in sync. And good couples learn how to really, really cherish the moments when they are in sync, and to appreciate those moments when they're working together and making strides as one. And those same good couples also know how to resolve, minimize, and have some respect for those times when they may be out of sync or they're just barely missing each other, but understand the goodwill and intentions of the other person, and are able to kind of appreciate their good intention, but also lament maybe some disappointment that happens, and have some honest communication about that.
And then just come back to it, because I feel like if you're in a serious relationship and you guys are, I don't know, if there's an argument, and this may just be me, I am not, I don't do couples therapy like Dr. Hopkins, but I've been seeing some messed up relationships, so I'm an amateur couples. So it's like, if you really want to be with this person, and you really understand like the good parts that you're talking about, like when you are in sync, then that should really like help color how you argue, for one, because I don't know how you think you're gonna get back to being in sync when you told this man or this woman that they ain't shit like 5 times. Like, I don't know how we're gonna get back there. So that gets to it. But if you really understand like the strength of your relationship, then like arguments should be different. They don't even need to be arguments. They're just disagreements. You can disagree and not argue. Like, I feel like arguments are like an upper level of disagreement. You can just disagree about stuff. You can also decide to like take a step back and talk about it later, like go get some food, chill out. But I feel like if you don't really appreciate what's going on in a relationship, and you don't really know where you are in the relationship, and you don't really know if you want to keep it together, it's more easier to say that stupid stuff, or say those arguments, or like start snapping at each other, because it's just like, I mean, well, we can be in this relationship today or tomorrow, but I want to get out what I want to get out. Versus if it's like, oh no, I want to be with you, this is a disagreement, I want to have a conversation with you, I'm not trying to hurt you, I just really want you to understand my side of it. I really feel like you have to take stock on where you want the relationship to go before you start snapping at somebody. Yes. Because you can't take that stuff back. And apologies are great, but I'm never, like, you're not going to forget when somebody, called you everything but a child of God. And you're just like, oh yeah, well let's go to dinner. I know that was last week, but I'm totally over it. Yeah. So I feel like that's where relationships, like they go bad, and they just spiral, because it's like, well, do you want to be in this relationship? Because the way you talking to me, it's like I'm some random person on the street. Well, like, this is crazy.
And it creates more problems, right? Because then the argument no longer even becomes about the thing that you all disagreed about or were hurt about in the first place.
No, it's about what you said during the disagreement.
And that stuff is like uncontained rage and aggression in relationships is like toothpaste. Right? You squeeze it out the tube, you can't put it back in the tube.
Oh, okay. Oh, I think we need to put that on the Instagram.
You can't, right? Once it's out, right? You can't unring a bell. The sound is already reverberated in the air. Like, so I agree completely. Like, couples, individuals as well, but when in a relationship, like, you do have to learn certain ways to regulate how you feel. We are advocates for the fact that feeling is a normal human process, and I will say it till the cows come home. It is your birthright to feel however you. I do have Southern roots.
Who says that? I do my God! I thought you were from Queens. What are you talking about?
I'm gonna announce what I'm making. I'm gonna announce what I'm making a self-disclosure from now on, so that it's like highlighted.
No, but my face is like.
So here's a self-disclosure. Both sets of my grandparents are from South Carolina.
Okay. Okay.
So I do have some Southern roots. But I will say this to the Couch of Hope, which basically means I'll say this to infinity, right? Like, it is your birthright to feel however you feel for the rest of your life. You don't choose that. But we do get to choose how we manage it. And in relationships,
it's the behavior after that gets you in trouble. It's not like the anger. It's like the punching somebody after the anger.
And let's be clear, right? There are things that we think that are taboo. There are things that we feel that might be socially inappropriate. But that doesn't. What makes it appropriate or not right or taboo is acting it out. So the feeling and the thoughts are different from behavior. You can think things and you can feel things, but when you act it out, that becomes a different thing. And our behavior, obviously, their behaviors have different consequences and are judged differently by society than our feelings and thoughts.
But don't believe everything you think. Sometimes people think just because you thought it, that is true. People think so much crazy stuff. Don't like saying crazy. Right. People think so much inaccurate things. That doesn't make it true. Like, oh, he did that. He must have meant this. Well, why don't we ask the person if that's what they meant instead of just assuming?
Especially
you don't know.
Yes. So
just ask them.
Absolutely.
No, because I think you'll think something, which is a lot of time like tinted by emotion. So you're thinking a lot of stuff, and then that doesn't mean it's true. Like, there's a lot of crazy stuff that I think, and I'm sure it's not accurate. Like, what? Most of it is, though, because I'm a genius. But some of it is not.
Right.
So
the feeling, right? You might feel neglected by that partner, like whoever that person
and
was.
Like, they meant to do that.
Yeah. But the assumption that they meant to do it may not be accurate. That doesn't mean that your feelings of neglect are not valid, and that there's something that your partner needs to understand about why you feel that way. But your assumption of why the partner did the thing that made you feel that way may not be true, because again, we all have our own subjective reality. That may not be something that partner originally thought of, or they may have made some assumptions that were different from that didn't align with your needs. Again, we're talking about that human imperfection, and where like temperament, genes, experiences are not always going to line up in the day-to-day interactions that we have. And then there's hurt, but we can't always assume that hurt is coming from one particular place to another. So I think good couples reserve their assumptions and then they resort on their communication to figure out the why of the other person's behavior.
Or they make their assumptions to their friends and vent it out, and then come to the relationship like a productive human being. Like, you could just call your friend and be like, I just need to be crazy for a minute because I think somebody is tripping, and I just feel like they think I'm playing, but I'm not. And then you take that all in, you let your friend be like, I know he tripping, and then go back and be like, so I didn't appreciate when you did this. So like, you can just let stuff out to other people before you like bring it all out to your partner. Like, that's what friends are for, you know, or a good clinician. I also do not think we're going to get to the other two parts today. I feel like we're going to have to just finish positive hallmarks and then like wrap it on up.
Yeah, I think so as well.
So what are the other positive hallmarks? Separate identities.
Separate identities is
a really
important.
important one. I don't want to be up under nobody 24/7.
Yeah, right. Like, you need, right. There's, going back to like our conversation on attachments, right? In a secure attachment, there is both independence and dependence, interdependence.
The whole point is like the balance. Like, I need to be able to
there's balance. Leave. I can come to you, I can be with you, and I can also leave and do my own thing. And I think healthy couples are able to balance that. You know, there is always a level of codependency in relationships.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
You still like the person, but like I also like my friends. So like, if I want to, like, you guys play basketball. Right. You about to go to brunch for like the 50th time this month, and like, because I feel like you appreciate the person more when you get to hang out, but you also want to have other friends. Because you don't want anyone to, like, can you imagine just being, some couples like work together and I'm just like, well,
that's
how am I going to tell them the story about like what happened at work if they were there?
Yeah.
like you'd be like, I know I was in the meeting as well. I saw the whole thing.
Right.
Like,
you need some time to miss each other.
Can we just miss each other? You can just do what you do. But trust comes with that too, because if you don't trust your partner, you want them like up under you 24/7. So like the trust is the biggest thing too.
Right. There's that balance between enmeshed and diffuse boundaries, where you're too close enmeshment, or your boundaries are too diffuse and you're too distant. Having diffuse boundaries and being enmeshed is actually they're actually one and the same. So let me restate that. So having a diffuse boundary, someone can be way too close because your boundaries are too porous, right? But if your boundaries are overly rigid, that person can't get close enough, and then you end up having relationships and when there's lack of care and there's some apathy and distance.
It's the difference between a sponge and a brick.
There you go. Oh,
Because
I like
porous,
that.
right? Because porous, I thought of a sponge.
Right.
Okay, so I got one. So I got a question.
Uh-oh.
That has to do with relationship boundaries, and it's because I see it all the time now.
Okay.
So like social media stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like all the passwords and stuff, right?
Ooh, this is going somewhere.
So like, do you feel like it's appropriate for your like spouse, and I don't know, maybe like girlfriend, boyfriend too. It depends on like how much you like this person, to have your passwords to things, and it doesn't have to be everything. It could just be like your phone.
So, I'm going to answer this question in the way that is going to annoy the hell out of you with
Please
my clinical hat.
Please just answer the question for you.
I'm going to answer the question for me.
All right.
So my first answer is going to depend on the couple and the situation that they find themselves in. And in particular, with couples that have issues with trust, where trust has been broken in the past, like if there's been an affair, like those kind of things are actually encouraged. So that you open up.
To have them?
Yeah. Like, literally.
I would think the opposite.
Well, no, it's encouraged. It's encouraged initially in order to rebuild trust, so that because part of why trust gets broken, right, is there's some sort of lie that has been happening, which means the boundary might have been too rigid, right? There's something that one person didn't know that happened. Like,
wait,
at least
to cheat?
Yeah.
No,
well, no.
I don't want to come back to this. Sometimes people cheat just to cheat, but like.
I'm not talking about why the person cheated. I'm talking about the fact that they cheated. Like there is a time, like that the spouse may not have known about the cheating.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so that's like the secrecy and stuff.
Right.
Like
yeah,
that.
the secrecy. Okay. Right. I'm talking about the secrecy that comes with an affair. Like the boundary was too rigid, and that there was some secrecy around the affair.
What boundary was too rigid?
Whatever boundary there is established once the affair becomes a secret. Once it happens and there is a secret.
Yeah.
Then there's something that the other partner is not being told.
That doesn't sound like so the boundary thing is what confuses me, because when you say boundary, I think like, I don't know, they didn't know that they could cheat. Like, is there a different word? Because that's confusing to me. So
I guess what I mean is like once an affair happens, right? It's likely that the partner doesn't know, or the things that led up to the affair, right? There are likely things that the partner didn't know about the interaction that the cheater was having with the other person.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that whatever the cheater did, right, in order to get in contact with that person, an established relationship with that person, there's likely some secrecy in that.
Okay, so that's the boundary you're talking about.
Yes, and
okay,
so what I'm saying is that the boundaries within the relationship were too rigid around that thing is because
they were able to do
because there was secrecy.
Yeah. Okay.
So a diffuse boundary is when it's more porous and you're way too close and you're open about everything. Yeah. A rigid boundary is when you withhold a lot of things. So in order to kind of like ease the rigidity in their communication around this particular thing and to rebuild trust, you kind of open up the boundaries a little bit more just so that you can come back to a place of balance, and so that you can help reestablish some sense of trust. So actually, if there is a situation when there's someone who's been involved in an affair, you would encourage them for brief periods, maybe for a few months, where there is an exchange of passwords, and that person, there is nowhere to hide, right? There is trust being rebuilt, and so the boundary becomes a little bit more diffuse for the time being, so you can do just that. You can get closer. You can build intimacy, which is based on trust. So that's my clinical answer.
Okay, so what's your that was your Dr. Hopkins answer.
Yes.
So what's your Justin answer?
Re-ask the question.
What? do you feel like your spouse? So it may be different for girlfriend and boyfriend versus like husband or wife or whatever. So do you feel like they should be able to have your passwords?
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't know. Like, I also feel, honestly, Raquel, like, I don't feel like my clinical hat is too much different from my personal hat, because I just feel like...
Oh, my God. I don't think that's accurate at all.
Well, when it comes to this, right, like, I'm okay with
when it comes to this.
Like, I'm okay with my partner having the passwords to my phone. Like, when I've been in...
I want everyone to keep this for... so, just in case... keep this episode. What timestamp is this? Everybody remember this. I just want you, because you never know. You never know who's out there. No, I know. I always just try to lock you down in some kind of like soundbite. Like, so this is a soundbite.
You're gonna start.
Let it be known.
You're gonna start transcribing our episodes.
I'm gonna put that in the timestamp. Like, if anyone comes down the line and like the things worked out, this is when he said this was not a problem. So don't let this man tell you that it's a problem, because we got it on air.
Look, I think
I'm gonna check this timestamp. Don't forget this.
Trust and intimacy are incredibly important in relationships. And if you have nothing to hide, what does it matter if someone sees your phone or not?
Good job. That was the right answer.
I don't.
It was all a trap, but you did it right. You get an A. You're a good human being. That was the right answer.
I agree.
That was the right answer.
Okay.
Because there was a wrong one. Okay. And you answered it well. So that was the right answer. Good job. Yeah. So let's end on that.
So on that, like, I don't think my perspective is too different.
No, but I mean, like, with clinical identities versus, like, my clinical identity is different than like my normal person identity. Because you can't just be like, like this all the time, especially like with some patients, they're not going to receive that. So like, I know my clinical identity is way mellow. My voice is like soft, if you can believe it.
Right.
Like, it's crazy.
But in terms of the things that I believe, I'm genuine about that. Right. Like, you can't.
Well, yeah, I get that, but like. So, like, even solely with, like, parenting stuff, I have to work with families, like, that do stuff in parenting that is, like, totally opposite of what I would ever do. Mm-hmm. But that's, like, how I am personally. Therapeutically, it's like, all right, this is what we're going to rock with. I'm not trying to change your whole entire dynamic. Yeah. So, like, there has to be some separation, because you're going to have a patient or someone who does something that you would never agree with. But it's like, if you're not being abusive, if this works for you, it works for you. It's like the dude, what's the dude, Voldemort, who, like, had the dinner. He doesn't, do dinners without his wife.
Voldemort. Mike Pence.
Yeah. Mike Pence.
Voldemort. Yeah.
He looks like, or like a Dementor. That dude looks creepy. But like, if that's just like you said. You said that's their rule. Yeah. So I mean, that's their rule. So it's like, I mean, I can't really do nothing about that. That's his rule.
I'll just say this real quick about therapy, and then we'll wrap up. Like, there have been times when patients have doubted whether not me specifically, but I've heard this like among like other clinicians, right? Like have doubted. I'm sure this has happened in my sessions as well. Have like doubted whether I am being genuine about the things that I say, because I'm also being paid to listen to them. And I had a colleague of mine say, like,
how do you even answer? How do you get out of that?
Well, my colleague said, you know what, and this was his humor, and he was just saying, like, yeah, well, I guess to some extent, like, maybe I'm like hired emotional support, but I can't fake it. If I feel how I feel about you, then I will feel that and be genuine in my interpretations of what's happening with you and how I'm reacting to you. And so I have conversations with patients about, I mean, within the relationship, the relationship between patient and therapy, therapist is a real relationship. And in real relationships, you have situations in which people get upset, people get angry, or people are disappointed. And so as a clinician, though, you're not there to process your feelings about that, but you are there to help the patient process theirs. So I think it's important for patients to be able to be upset with their clinicians, be disappointed by their clinicians, and work through those things with the clinician.
As long as they don't fall in love with the clinician.
And the clinician be able to hold that, withstand that, understand where that is coming from, and continue the work of helping the patient understand themselves while genuinely interacting with them based on the things that they're sharing.
And they'll process it. I feel like any clinician, counselor, nurse, psychiatric nurse practitioner, psychiatrist, psychologist has had a patient like be pissed at them, and you're just like, okay, well, tell me what's making you upset. It's not like I can be like, and I'm mad at you too. Damn it, you were 15 minutes late. Right. Again, like we can't do that. So it's just like, well, where's the anger coming from?
Right. I mean, so part of what we're saying, I think, does, although we're off the reservation, part of what we're saying...
Shut your face. You do it all the time.
Yes.
Goodness.
We both do. We're so long-winded.
God.
But
we're wrapping it up now, though. Bye.
It does. It does relate to relationships, right? Those like honest conversations about the feelings that you have. It's just as a therapist, you help the other person process it in a rather one-sided way. But in any event, guys, this has been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed talking about relationships with you all.
We got a part 3 now, though.
Yeah,
we gotta get it
I think so.
The part 3 is gonna be the last one, though. We swear. That's when we'll do love languages, because we didn't do love languages.
That.
You
Let's
can geek
do
out
that.
on that, and then we could do like. Oh, we didn't do toxic relationships.
We didn't.
That's the fun. Those are the fun examples. So
maybe we'll do those two.
And maybe
in our
we
next
can make
episode.
make sure people include examples of like when shit. And it doesn't have to be about them. It could be about like a friend who had like a terrible relationship.
Raquel wants me to self-disclose more.
Yeah, like just some crazy stuff. Because like bad relationship stories are so fun. Like it's just like crazy. Can't wait.
Painful too, maybe.
Nah, man, you gotta laugh now. Like, what's the big deal now? I have had somebody throw my laptop down a flight of stairs. And last statement he said was, "You forgot something." What kind of shit is that? And now it's just like, that was the funniest line ever. It wasn't funny then, but like, you look in shock. But that's funny now. You gotta laugh.
That is fucked up.
Wasn't it fucked up?
That is...
More stories next week. Like, 'cause it's just like, what the shit? Like now when I think about it, I was like, damn, that was a cold ass line, and just hurled it down a flight of stairs. Undergrad was fun.
Well, that's a mic drop.
That's a mic drop.
Laptop drop.
Because a laptop drop. See, even you can laugh. Like this shit is funny. Like
I mean, I don't have a choice now. You just already.
Right? You gotta laugh at it. Bad relationship stories are hilarious.
Or awful.
I'll be cracking up about them all the time. I ain't gotta worry about it no more. So it's just like,
gosh.
shit, I ain't never going through that again.
Well, on that note, part 3 is definitely coming soon. What's love got to do with it? We're gonna keep talking about relationships.
It's a series.
It is a
It's
series.
A relationship and we are gonna get into like families and friends and stuff too.
We are. So tune in next week, guys. We've really enjoyed doing this. So keep tuning in. Take a look at our Instagram at theblackunconscious.com.
Yep.
We're also on Twitter at BLKUnconscious. Where else are we, Raquel? Facebook.
We have a website, theblackunconscious.com. That looks
That's
awesome.
right.
And then we're also going to be at DC Podfest. And next week's episode is actually going to be a recording of like the panel that we're doing. We're going to try to give you some clips of that.
Sure.
So that's what you'll see next week.
And then we'll come out with our part 3 of what's love got to do with it.
That one's going to be shorter though. It's just going to be toxic relationships and
Raquel,
love languages.
You know that.
It's not going to be short. My bad. Never mind.
Come on.
Thank you.
See you guys in a week. Peace.